Wolfpack, what's going on? It's your boy, the Wolf of Roto Street. RotoStreetJournal.com. We breed and feed you fantasy wolves here with your Week 7 waiver wire update, telling you the top 10 pickups plus a handful more, your top defensive streamers that you got to check out this week, and so much more. So come on in, get settled in. Thank you again for your patience tonight. If you were waiting for me, I had to restart my computer twice. Finally, I think got it working. Let me know in the comments if the audio is working, the video, everything. Definitely had some technical difficulties. I was ready to go at 7, and it's been a mess. But thank you again if you waited this out, and if you're catching the replay, thanks for being here. Let's just skip the pleasantries, but I'll double-check the comments as they come in here to make sure everything is working and up and going. My apologies there. As we're building the crowd, we'll dive into just the first checks, right around 50% rostered guys that may have been dropped in your leagues, something to check out more so in these shallow leagues that we definitely want to have in there. Jeff Wilson, 52% rostered. You don't really need much of an explanation here. The Dolphins 9th in carries, but first in every other rushing category. Yards per carry, 1,091 yards on the season, 6.49 yards per carry, a whopping 15 touchdowns scored by their running backs. It is insane. The highest explosive run rate, 9% of their runs going for 10 or more yards. First in touchdown percentage, 9% of their carries going for touchdowns. It is the most fertile system for running backs. And Wilson was the lead guy last year before getting hurt. 16 and 22 points, then 12 points and a half, gets hurt. Ultimately could see him being the most valuable running back down the stretch should something happen to Achane or Raheem Mostert here. And even then, I think Wilson could carve out a goal line role there. So 52% rostered. Double check and see if he is out there. Tajay Spears finally making his way to the first check. We've mentioned this guy in every single stream so far. He's played 50% or more of the snaps in 5 of 6 weeks, 2 games more than Henry himself. He's got 63 yards in back-to-back games, the ultimate handcuff with benefits. It doesn't even need an injury to ultimately gain value, just because he could ultimately, this Titans team, want to turn over the keys, see what we have in our young guys. There's a chance if they get their eyes to the future that he could be in 15-plus touches. You got Roshan Johnson, a lot of people forgetting about him, but with Donta Foreman, meh. On his appearance this last week, 15 carries, 65 yards. He was okay, but nothing special. I know this Bears team is looking a little less sexy with Justin Fields hurt, but still, Roshan, what better chance to just turn the keys over, see what you got in your hand-selected rookie. He was, remember, one of the most elite tackle breakers last year in college, more so than even Bijan Robinson, his teammate. So I'm a big fan of Roshan, plus a great pass catcher as well. Could definitely find himself in a 3-down role. Got to remind you, Jameson Williams getting cut in a lot of leagues. And I understand only 19% of the routes last week. That's sketchy. But that big play touchdown flashed why you believe in this kid so much. He's got that elite game-wrecking speed. All the reports in camp where he has really evolved his role too. So I think it's a matter of when, not if, we get a full-time role for Jameson Williams. A nice stretch run schedule for the kid as well. So definitely someone to continue to stash or check and see if an impatient owner dropped him. Rashee Rice, no longer on my waiver wire list because he's near 50% at this point, but I wanted to just point out 50% of the routes, a season high last week. He's had 11 PPR fantasy points in 4 of 6 games, showing the best chemistry of any wide receiver, not named Travis Kelce, the tight end there, with Patrick Mahomes. Wouldn't be shocked at all, given the damage he's doing on most of the season, a third of the snaps, being the most productive receiver here. Wouldn't be shocked at all if he gets a full-time role and really starts to light it up. Rashee Rice, great after the catch. And last but not least, Zach Charbonnet, purely a handcuff, but just want to remind you that this kid, when he's gotten the ball, very much flashed. And this would be an elite role should something happen to Ken Walker, who's been a monster, leading the NFL in rushing touchdowns from the inside the 5. They love to pound it there. And Charbonnet would be a huge bet for top 3 numbers should something happen. That wraps up our first look, Wolfpack. Again, guys, and thank you, everybody, commenting in. You can see and hear me okay. Really appreciate it, and sorry again for that delay. Thanks so much for your patience. It was ready to go. And then, of course, some tech difficulties here. We're going to up our tech game soon. We've got some good reason to do so. So we will, nonetheless, let's just continue forward because I know we're late tonight. Before we get into our top 10, though, Wolfpack, if you enjoy content any minute, that thumbs up, it really does help us grow. You can see in that right-hand corner over there. Likes, subs, join that page, climb into 5K. Would love to have you be a part of this if you enjoy what you're hearing. So before I get into the top 10, I did want to toss out a couple QB streamers, given that we have 6 teams on buys, tons of injuries, including at the quarterback position, from Jimmy Garoppolo, you probably weren't starting him, but Anthony Richardson potentially done for the year. Maybe Trevor Lawrence out this week. Just a wild week of injuries, including the quarterback position. So many of you might be looking for streamers. None of these guys cracked my top 10 overall, but I wanted to toss a few out there in case you need them. At the top list would absolutely be Sam Howell, 38% rostered. Should he still be out there in your league? He's had 17 or more points in 5 of his first 6 games. The only time he didn't was against the Bills, a elite pass defense at the time. And he's now coming off his first 3D performance against the Falcons there. And now he gets the Giants, the Eagles, the Pats with no Christian Gonzalez or Judon, Seattle. All great matchups coming up here for Sam Howell. So definitely a guy when they are taking the 3rd most pass attempts right now in the league. That's the first over the pass rate over expectation too. Eric Bieniemy's offense is just slinging the rock, letting the kid do his thing, and Howell running a lot as well. Great, just plus arm and Konami upside, big plays. Even without Dotson or the receivers doing a ton, we're seeing a lot of quality numbers come out of Howell. If you miss on him, Derek Carr dropped by a ton of people, 25% rostered. I get how unsexy it is, but coming off a 350-yard passing day, very empty, just 1 touchdown there. 3 straight before that under 200, but it finally looked like he's healthy again. I mean, a whopping 50 pass attempts. He's been a full participant in practice so far this week, and he gets the Jags this week. A top 10 matchup for quarterbacks. I think positive regression is bound to happen here, given that every single game is finished with under 37 points total between them and their opponents. I think that could absolutely spike here with the Jags, the Colts, Chicago, Minnesota, all great matchups here coming up for Derek Carr if you're desperate for a quarterback. And every single one of those games also going to be played at Dome as well. So good stuff for him. And if you miss out on both those guys, Gardner Minshew, a whopping 55 pass attempts, insane volume for this kid, 329 yards, 1 touchdown. Did throw the 3 picks, which resulted in a meh day, 13 overall fantasy points. And both his starts now back-to-back 13-point days. The ceiling feels pretty capped here, but they're overall running a ton of offense with him out there, still keeping their pedal to the metal. There'll be better days for Gardner Minshew. Now, I wanted to give a couple honorable mentions here. The first being the cover boy of the show, Leonard Fournette. What's the latest on him? Only 2% rostered. Is now the time to stash Lenny Fournette. Let's chat about the latest on him. He has interest from apparently multiple teams, including the Bills. They said they were going to have him in on a visit on Monday Night Football. Everyone starts to go a little bit nuts. Ultimately, they did not bring him in, but he's reportedly in great shape. And just a reminder, as soon as you heard his name pop up, it was like, oh, I got to go check. Is Lenny out there in my league? At some point, a team is likely to bring him in. Look at all the injuries around the league at this point, and I will never fully believe that reports are him in great shape. I don't know if we've ever seen Lenny Fournette in great shape, but he's certainly not the worst running back out there in some of these barren backfields, whether it's the Rams who come calling. Maybe the Bills do end up looking for another goal line hammer with Damian Harris banged up. We will see who else. Multiple teams are quote-unquote interested. I'd say now is the time. I know the bye weeks are going to be tough, but if you have deep benches, if you have the spots available, I think Lenny Fournette, you might have to wait another week or two. That's why he's on the top 10 of this list, but certainly above guys like Zach Evans at 10, the 49ers speculative ads. If you don't need those immediate streamers that we're about to dive into, I think Lenny Fournette has as much upside as anyone you can add this week. So definitely check for him, and you can check for Craig Reynolds on the opposite end of that spectrum, a guy that might have 1-2 week value, but could be solid value. We shall see. Jahmyr Gibbs is trending the right way, according to Dan Campbell, who's always transparent and upfront about his guys. And when Jahmyr Gibbs was in, but David Montgomery, that's the reason either of these guys are warranting consideration. It's because David Montgomery, rib injury, fell hard on the ball, cartilage. They got to buy in 2 more weeks. This typically is about a 2-week injury anyways. So I imagine we won't see Montgomery week 7, week 8, week 9 bye. Then we get the return of him. So could be thrusting Craig Reynolds into a bigger role. Certainly if Gibbs does not play. Again, trending in the right direction, but 60% of the snaps, 57% of the carries went to Gibbs in that start, and it was mediocre. It was 17 carries, 80 yards. It was okay. He never lit the world on fire. We do imagine that Craig Reynolds could still see some of that goal line work. He saw 30% of the snaps and only 13% of the carries last time Montgomery missed. So I do think it would be the Gibbs show, but coming off a hammy injury of his own, I imagine we'll get a little bit higher involvement from Craig Reynolds, who typically has played very well when used. I'm just a big fan of the kid. A hard-nosed, no-nonsense kind of guy. Definitely a threat at the goal line as well. Not an ideal matchup here against the Ravens, but not as scary as they've been in the past either. So Craig Reynolds, if you're desperate for some volume, especially if Gibbs misses. If Gibbs misses, he'd probably be a top 5 guy on this waiver wire for this week as a streamer. But with Gibbs probably back, he becomes more of an honorable mention. Now, again, we'll move into the top 10. Again, Wolfpack, as we do, that thumbs up button would be so greatly appreciated. Thank you for spending your Tuesday nights here with me. Jahmyr Gibbs. Oh, no. So let's dive into here again. All right, so we mentioned Craig Reynolds. Sorry, I lost my place for a second. Zach Evans, 4% rostered. Definitely a guy warranting a 1-week rental potentially. Fool's Gold, also maybe. So that's why I have him here at the bottom of the list, because I don't fully buy into this. Similar to the Cardinals backs last week, wasn't ready to go all in on them. I'm not ready to go all in on Zach Evans. Now, we know Kyren's likely to miss this week. Doesn't sound like an overly serious ankle injury, but at minimum 1 week out, potentially more than that. And Zach Evans could be the prime handcuff, given Ronnie Rivers is also going to be out 4 to 5 weeks. A lot of owners stashing Ronnie Rivers, and wisely so. The process was right. He was the number 2 guy, and thinking Kyren can't hold up to this workload. Well, he didn't. He had a monster day, 158 yards, 20 touches, 2 touchdowns. Great Kyren days. And that's why we have to at least consider Zach Evans, because Kyren's nothing overly special. He's definitely flashed and really just hard-nosed, getting downfield, showing well on his cuts, great around the end zone, great receiver as well. So I don't want to discount Kyren, but he overall is nothing exciting as a talent, and neither is Zach Evans. But that just goes to show anyone can kind of get tossed into this Sean McVay scheme. If they're going to be a true and utter workhorse like Kyren, it won't matter. He'll be a top 10 running back. Now, I don't think that's going to be the case. I imagine that we don't know anything about Evans as a pass protector right now. They have Royce Freeman waiting in the wings. They called up Myles Gaskin now, too. So I think we'll get some carries out of Zach Evans. 936 yards, 9 touchdowns on 144 college carries last year, but just a 5% target share, some red flags as a pass protector. That's why I just don't know we can really trust and go all in on Zach Evans, because at most, I think you're getting a week. And even in that week, I think it's going to be a pure timeshare. And really, I imagine you're just going to spread it out, chuck the rock about 40, 50 times. So to me, Zach Evans, sure, if you're desperate, worth the stream. As a Kyren owner in a bunch of leagues, I'll try to get him, but I'm not going to toss more than $2 to $3. Especially at 6.8 yards per carry in college, plus athleticism, an 80th percentile burst score, an agility score. There are things that are nice about this profile. A lot of people did love him in scouting season, but he's just not my favorite guy, certainly because of that lack of pass catching involvement and pass protection skills especially. I think he's going to keep him off the field, and he'll be at best a 50% snap player, and probably even less than that with Royce Freeman or someone more trusted working in for this offense. Moving forward, at number 9, I have our 49ers running backs, who would be significantly higher if CMC was due for a lengthy absence. As of right now, it seems at most that Christian McCaffrey will be out with that oblique injury for just a week. So let's talk about which one, though, if he is out, should you go after the most? To me, I think it's Jordan Mason. 62% of the snaps, 67% of the rush attempts, 25% of those runs going for 10 or more yards, a great rate. Also had 64% of the routes as well. All of these coming when McCaffrey left the game. Just 24% of the snaps for Eli Mitchell, just a smattering of carries, nothing much there for him. Granted, though, let's caution that we got to pencil Mason in for the clear-cut number 2 role, because Kyle Shanahan has already come out and said Eli Mitchell has earned a ton with us over these years. I think when healthy, he's been as good as any back there is. He just had a hard time staying healthy, but I can't take away anything from him. He then went on to say, comment about Mason being a quality back as well. So I think either way, whoever's the nominal starter, I think Mitchell's small snap share, small workload was more a result of him working back from injury and not necessarily an indictment of what this depth chart sits at. It makes both of these guys risky to splurge too much on. I think if we did get a game or 2 out of them, it would be at best a 55, 45 type of committee, which in such an efficient run scheme as Kyle Shanahan's, that could yield some value, especially for Jordan Mason, who now has a PFF grade of 92.5 over his last 2 seasons, second best among all running backs in that span. It's a small sample size, but he's played really well. He passes the eyeball test for sure. Favorite of our 49ers beat go-to Grant Cohen, who comes on the pod a bunch. So it was his show. I like the player just a little bit more, at least right now, Jordan Mason, but I do think Eli Mitchell would be very, very involved, if not potentially even the starter, which makes it a big risk to spend more than 3% of your FAAB on either one of these guys. At the end of the day, though, both should probably be rostered given how great this offense is, how productive the run scheme is. There's tons of value to be mined should CMC end up missing more time than expected or suffer a setback or any type of bigger injury on this year. Both these guys warrant consideration. Moving forward here, those were two streams. Now we're going to talk about a stash, and that's Marvin Mims. And many of you have probably gotten sick of hearing me talk about this guy. I didn't bring him up last week, and why would he come up again after just 7 routes last week? He's among the most dropped players after this, and that's why I want to remind you guys that on only 58 routes, the 6th most routes on the team, Mims is second on the Broncos in yards. He still has the top 7 big plays of the year, 8 of the top 10, and again on 58 routes. It is ridiculous that we can't get more involvement here for Marvin Mims, but Jeudy is clearly looking like he's on his way out at this point. He's complaining, he's whining, he thinks he's better than he is, some unearned self-entitlement. Not a fan of Jerry Jeudy at all. And on nearly 3 times the routes, 157, we've seen Mims outproduce Jerry Jeudy, even though he is tripling him up in routes right now. So I think as soon as he gets thrust into that bigger role, and maybe it never will happen. I don't understand it. It was Sean Payton's first pick of his era. They didn't need a receiver, and they still went out and got this guy. We've seen Marquise Colston, the last pick of the draft as a rookie, become an every down, monstrous 1,300-yard rookie receiver. So it's not like a trend with Payton that he doesn't like to use his rookies at all. I don't know what's happening. But we do know that he is behind only Tyreek Hill right now, Marvin Mims, in yards per route run. He has some of the craziest efficiency stats, and I do think it's a matter of when, not if, he'll finally blow up. We'll find out when that will be. Hopefully in the near future. Hopefully a trade can facilitate that. If you need someone more usable, though, Wan'Dale Robinson, 18% rostered, got added a bunch, then got cut a bunch, and now he deserves to be right back added. He should never have been cut in the first place because, one, the slot role in this Giants offense dating back to last year where Richie James was a top 12 wide receiver when he took over the full-time role after Wan'Dale's injury, which was coming on the backs of a 13-target time catch, over 100-yard first half, and then he got hurt. So we've seen this slot role that Wan'Dale Robinson is now dominating. He's clearly taken over for Paris Campbell. We've seen this yield great numbers, and it started for him, Wan'Dale, this week, 27% target share. We've seen everything going up. Started with 16%, 20%, 21%, now 27% target share through his 4 games so far. That's on 25, 63, 56, and then bam, 73% of the routes, his most of the season. We've seen this kid dominate before. It seems like he's ready to do so again. It is so risky putting a ton of stock into one of the worst passing offenses in the league that looks shockingly much better with Daniel Jones on the bench. We'll see if that happens. But the wide receiver 21 on 14 PPR points or 6 catches, or 8 catches rather. All 8 of his targets get hauled in, 100% catch rate, 62 yards. Still a meh, kind of like 4.38 ADOT. It's all just dink and dunk design stuff. But in PPR leagues, especially, that has a place, especially in these bye weeks right now. I did want to shout out Jalen Hyatt and also Darius Slayton as well, though. Given similar to Wando, they all have great matchup coming up against Washington. That's been a top 3 matchup for wide receivers all year. In particular, they've been weak against outside receivers. So Jalen Hyatt and especially Darius Slayton, a little bit of the bigger body here. Not huge, but the biggest of the wide receivers that sees time. I think all these guys are viable streams this week, with especially Darius Slayton. Season low for Isaiah Hodgins, 20% routes. He is clearly the fourth, a distant fourth at this point. We had 93% of the routes, 17% of the targets going to Darius Slayton, 2% rostered. I think he's a very viable streamer this coming week here. He's had reliable volume all season. He hasn't done a ton with it. Season high this week, 4 catches, 69 yards. Not too empty at this point. 12.6 average depth of targets against the Commanders team that struggles mightily with those perimeter receivers. Big play after big play. But maybe it will also be the Jalen Hyatt coming out part. Now, I don't feel great about starting this kid 2% roster right now. 4 targets, 3 catches, 21 yards against the Bills. But the big thing was 80% of the routes went to Jalen Hyatt, 30% of the air yards, a couple deep shots that just barely missed connecting. He was the star of training camp. Odell Beckham taking notice, taking number 13 and saying, this kid deserves it. This was the best wide receiver in college football, earning that big enough word last year. So at Tennessee, a lot of people wondering if it's just scheme. We'll find out. But ultimately, Jalen Hyatt stepping onto the field was number one step here. Now it's about earning the targets and especially connecting on some of those deep throws coming up. But well worth a stash in those deeper leagues and potentially a stream for Darius Slayton. Of course, again, Wan'Dale, though, my favorite of the Giants receivers moving forward. Now, if you need tight end help, and who among us doesn't? Michael Mayer had a phenomenal week. His role continues to ascend, and I believe he could be a rest of season top 10 tight end moving forward now that we're seeing him in a near full-time role. This kid would have been probably the number one tight end in almost any draft class, but he just happened to be in a historic class with Kincaid and Laporta going ahead of him. But he could be that next rookie sensation similar to Laporta. Not quite the athlete, not quite the body control, but still 70th percentile in 40-yard dash. 249 pounds, 6'5", but running a 4.7 40. When you adjust that for speed score, for size, 102.8 speed score, 73rd percentile there. The kid can move for his size. He uses his big frame well, and the role continues to grow, which is what we wanted to highlight here. From week 1 through 4, the Raiders had the lowest target share to tight ends, 5.3%. It was abysmal. Since then, they've started to target the tight end position near the top of the league. 21.7% of the targets have gone to tight ends over their last 2 games, and Michael Mayer is the one benefiting the most, 11%. And then this last week, 21% target share, ultimately recording a top 5 tight end day with those targets, 5 catches, 75 yards. And if you just watch the man play, beastly after the catch, bowling over people, showing good agility for his size. And we're seeing Hooper continue to dwindle. Season low, 27% of the routes for Hooper this last week. Steady decline there. Meanwhile, a season high for Mayer, 67% of the routes, 27% targets per route run. It is growing. It's not the fastest of overall offenses, but especially like, what if Adams, works out a trade here and he's kind of talking his disgruntled way. He wants to get out of here. Either way, I think Mayer's role is going to continue to ascend and grow, but it could even spike further should they move Adams or a piece like that. At tight end, when you need something, this is about as reliable as I think you're going to get. I could see many more days like this for a talent like Mayer. Who should be the number one wide receiver pick of the week? We've got a handful more to go down. Josh Downs certainly warrants that consideration here. Has 5 catches on 8 targets, just 21 yards, but does score with Gardner Minshew. And you just got to look at his numbers so far with Minshew. His last 3 games where Minshew has predominantly played, 13.7, 15.7, and now 13.1 PPR points with Gardner Minshew as his primary quarterback, compared to just 6 and 5.4 with Anthony Richardson. Now, I know I would much rather have Anthony Richardson on the field just for real life wise, fantasy wise himself. He leads the NFL in points per dropback. Richardson's a monster, but he is now apparently going to miss the rest of the season. It sounds like, given that he's going to have a shoulder surgery, get that thing healthy. Definitely going to be back on the Anthony Richardson train in 2024. But for now, that means Minshew's taking back over. And we saw last week, 55 pass attempts. They have no qualms letting this guy just go out and chuck it. The game script called for a ton of passing, but we know the Colts in general have been top 5 pass rate over expectation, even with Richardson, not known as a college passer. They've been top 3 in plays run on the year. This is a fast-paced offense that isn't afraid to chuck it, isn't afraid to let Minshew go out there and just whip it around the yard, whether he deserves to or not is another question, but he has been doing so. The schedule does get more favorable from here on out, so I could see Josh Downs, really good chemistry with him. I get it. 14 targets for Michael Pittman. He is the number one, but it seems like Downs has really settled in as that clear-cut go-to number 2 guy, a favorite of their coach, Reggie Wayne, called him the number 1 receiver of this class, and they're certainly using him that way as of now. But I also think you might want to turn to Curtis Samuel first if he's out there in your league. Both of these guys worth about 22 to 25% of your FAAB, as was Michael Mayer. That kind of was that next tier jump into these higher end prospects. Curtis Samuel, his 3rd straight week with a touchdown. He has been highly used across these last 3 games, 18% target share, which might not sound insane, but when we're talking about the offense with the 3rd most pass attempts in the league, the highest pass rate over expectation right now, even 18%, 15% target share on the year for Samuel, that's going to produce some big numbers. If you talk about like a 35% target share in the Falcons offense, that's going to be less than what we're seeing in terms of just overall volume and targets than what we're getting here from this Commanders offense under Eric Bieniemy. He's using Samuel very creatively, one of the most highly motioned guys in the league right now, kind of similar to a Jerick McKinnon light role where he's getting motion into the backfield, getting some carries as well. wide receiver 11, 13, and then wide receiver 21 in his last 3 weeks. And seems like it's going to come at the clear expense of Jahan Dotson. Howell definitely appears a little bit more comfortable targeting that middle of the field here with Curtis Samuel, who's really, really looking quality, just nice quality snaps out there, really using that quickness. People forget just how freakishly athletic he was, how he was an insane prospect at OSU and had some really huge glimpses, but hasn't really had that full season putting it together. Maybe he's going to take off this rest of the year. So I have him as my second highest rookie wide receiver on the waiver wire this week, just slightly ahead of Josh Downs. Now, in between him and my number 1 wide receiver, Devin Singletary, my number 3 pickup of the week. This is significantly higher than Fantasy Pros and number 22 on their list, a fringe ad by a lot of people. I think this guy is a must pick up. I would risk about 20% of the budget if you felt like you had to do so. I'm a huge fan. One, because of Pierce's struggles, just 34 yards, 13 carries, 2.6 yards a pop. Carrying over a trend that's just been hideous this year. 2.9 yards a carry on the season right now, has not averaged more than 3.5 yards a carry in any of his games so far. And where this guy was the monster at breaking tackles and yards after contact, last year, 3.29 yards after contact per attempt, just down to 2.25 so far this year. Actually, 4.3 per attempt last year on that metric. Just insanely less efficient. Just not a great scheme fit here. And even Bobby Slowick, the offensive coordinator, coming out and suggesting that this is not the exact right scheme, that outside zone where you need some speed and then quick acceleration, get up there. I don't think Singletary's a speed demon or a guy that's a monstrous fit for this scheme, but he is the guy they hand-selected to bring into this offense. They inherited Pierce. They've tried to make it work, and it just isn't right now. Meanwhile, they finally have things flip in this past week here for Devin Singletary. He logs a season high, right around 50% of the snaps here. Actually outsnaps Dameon Pierce 34-21. So almost 60% of the snaps, rather. I'm corrected there. It was more so the rushing attempts, one more going to Dameon Pierce, one less going to Singletary, but he outgains him significantly on that workload here with 12 carries, 58 yards, also hauling in a 4-yard pass. And Dameon Pierce, meanwhile, 13 carries, 34 yards, not a single target log there. To me, it's just signaling a change in the backfield. It's a week 7 bye. So some of you guys out there might not be able to afford the bench space and stashing him and waiting it out here with Singletary. I get that. You might need somebody that you can get and plug immediately in. But if you have the bench space, you have the ability to be patient here. I love this Texans offense. CJ Stroud has really turned these things around. They're towards the top in the league, in top 10 rather, in yards gained, and right around the top half of the league in points scored. And any back that's going to get meaningful work, it seems again like they're turning the keys over to Singletary. It's just a 1-week sample size, but given how much more effective he was on this, kind of his audition, his tryout, given how bad Dameon Pierce is, given his offensive coordinator's comments about how this might not be the best scheme for him, better suited for a gap scheme, I could see Singletary emerging as the bye, where teams often make these big switches, as the lead guy, and getting a lead back, a guy that could potentially be a running back too, from here on out, this late in the season, on a waiver wire where it's kind of garbage really everywhere else. I'll go for that. I'll go for that all day. I think he could be the number 1 player on this waiver wire if you did not need an immediate plug-in right now. Jackson Smith-Njigba, the guy that I am absolutely scanning every waiver wire for. A lot of impatient owners dropping him heading into last week after the bye week, and you got to go scan it, see if he's out there. And even if he's on a team, I bet you could pry him away for next to nothing. And I think buying low on him right now could pay humongous dividends later for JSN. Biggest role we've seen him have yet, 81% of the routes, 14% of the targets. Not crazy, those 5 targets, but 4 catches, 48 yards. Again, nothing earth-shattering here. It's just more so the fact that, one, he was on the field just as much as DK and Tyler Lockett. 57 for DK, 56 for Lockett, just 52 there for JSN. That's the clear-cut highest snap share, though, he's had on the year, and he ran exactly as many routes as both of those guys, 39 for all 3 wide receivers. Great to see him matching up on the lead guys here in terms of field time. Now it's a matter of, will the usage match it? Well, the good news is at least the targets, the ADOT rather, 7.4 this week. actual NFL receiver type usage where he had been at 1, 2.33, 4.33. We've seen it go up every single week to now a quality number in 7.4. So I definitely could see JSN, this role continuing to grow and grow and grow. And even without an injury, more 3 receiver sits. And we call this the offensive line getting healthier, less two tight ends with blocking considerations in there this last week, more 3 wide receiver personnel for the first time this year. So even just that is going to lead to more opportunities for JSN. But of course, ultimate handcuff upside there if something happened to Tyler Lockett or DK Metcalf, who's missed time in multiple games right now. He keeps cutting it out, DK, but oftentimes getting that big hit, running to the sideline, missing some time. So ultimately, it seems like a time bomb waiting to go off. And the schedule is so favorable for all these wide receivers, but including JSN. So as a guy who's done almost nothing this year, if there's one receiver that could just blow up and go crazy down the stretch, I could see it being JSN, a guy that was better than Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson when they were all on the team together during their junior seasons. I could see JSN being an absolute monster at the NFL level as well when he finally gets used. And Wolfpack, that brings us now to my number 1 pickup of the week and then on to your defensive streamers and all your questions. If you don't mind hitting that thumbs up button for me one more time, though, call for it. We got 33 of you here. Love to see that. Again, thank you so much for your patience as the technical difficulties arose. Love that you guys are willing to forgive me and stay here with us. It means the world. And if you don't mind hitting that thumbs up and, of course, subscribe, and if you haven't already, it would also mean the world to continue to grow our channel. But my number 1 pickup of Week 7 goes to Kareem Hunt. 35% rostered. I think he's worth 25 to 30% of your FAAB. Not one of those Achans, Kyron Williams, Pukas. We talked about blowing it all. Go out and get him. That's not Kareem Hunt, but I do think if you're running back needy, this is absolutely a great play from here on out. One, the bye week's already over for him, so you know you'll have a potential low-end running back too, flex play the rest of the year with room to grow. Absolutely. In fact, 16 PPR points this last week. He was the running back 11 despite having a lesser role than Jerome Ford. Now, I want to highlight Jerome Ford. He's been really, really solid. 51% of the snaps, 52% of the rush attempts. He has been the lead guy and really burned that clock out well in the fourth quarter. He's showing well, too. The tape, I like Jerome Ford. This is not an indictment on him. I do think he'll continue moving forward as the number 1 back. But what happened this past week, coming out of the bye, Kareem Hunt seems fully acclimated with his team and really absorbed. It seemed to me like before, him and Pierre Strong were kind of in a committee mopping up the number 2 duties behind Ford. This week, it was clear-cut Kareem Hunt. 38 snaps for Ford, 28 snaps for Kareem Hunt. And ultimately, again, the big spike in receiving routes for Kareem Hunt. Well, it goes from 16% before the bye up to 32%, matching almost Jerome Ford's 35%. Seeing a similar target share, both of them at 6% there. And like we said, Kareem Hunt doing more damage overall with his carries. 12 carries, 47 yards, getting the touchdown as well. He was the lead goal line back here, primary short yardage back, whereas Ford was kind of the primary third down back, but very similar route share for both of these guys. Really think Kareem Hunt, who passed the eyeball test as well, is running as hard as we've seen him. Definitely looked like he had a bit more juice to him than we saw last year. And we always know if injury away, so you got that handcuff with benefits, huge upside to Kareem Hunt. The number 2 backs almost always seem to make starts at some point, like Jerome Ford is right now. So definitely something to consider here, Kareem Hunt, as this offense enters the softest part of their schedule as well. They've both been running well, Jerome Ford and Kareem Hunt this last week against the 49ers, against, the last week, the Ravens before that, the Titans before that. They have had a tough go of things here and still have been producing. The rest of the season for these backs, the second easiest schedule. So I think Kareem Hunt, even in a number 2 role, is a guy you could definitely start in these bye week crunches and maybe even better than that moving forward. So he wraps up my waiver wire. That's my top 10 pickups and a handful of honorable mentions too, Wolfpack. Thank you so much for tuning into those. Let's dive into now my week 7 defensive streamers. And there's a ton of them out there. If you're a defensive streamer, you are in heaven this week. So many great offenses, some elite defenses out there too, starting at the top with the Cleveland Browns. I know they haven't been a monstrous fantasy unit, not a ton of touchdowns or takeaways, but has just an overall defense. They're the best in the league right now in terms of total yards allowed, in terms of success rate on the offense allowed, in terms of touchdowns allowed. They have been the best defense in the league. The fewest pass yards allowed in the league, just barely over 200 yards total surrendered to offenses right now by the Cleveland Browns, and under just at 120 passing yards per game for the Browns. This defense has been elite. And now they just held the 49ers juggernaut to just 17 points. That you need any other sign that this defense, and ultimately won, propelling them to a victory. You need any other sign that this team is legit? I don't know what else you're going to do to believe them. And now they get Gardner Minshew. We were just talking about 3 interceptions, 4 total takeaways on the day, 4 sacks as well. Top 3 matchup. Awesome defense for a number 1 team. If they're out there, you got to go after the Browns first. But you miss on them. The Raiders are actually more owned right now than them, given that matchup with the Patriots. That makes sense. But if they're somehow still out there, they're starting against Tyson freaking Badgett, maybe even Nathan Peterman, the turnover king. This defense isn't anything super special, this Raiders team, but they're actually the best team they've had since 2017 in terms of points allowed. They've had 12 and 19 fantasy points across their last 2 games, 25 sacks allowed for the Bears, and now they get statues in Bagent or Peterman, whoever ends up going there. This line's a disaster. So if it is Tyler Badgett, whatever the hell the guy's name is, this creature threw a pick 6 on his first play. He had 2 turnovers in 3 drives? They're going to destroy this kid. So the Raiders, definitely a solid play this week. I actually do feel even better, though, again, about the Bucs. 30% rostered right now. Given that they were facing Detroit, a lot of people cut them. They had 3 sacks against that elite offensive line for the Lions. They didn't ultimately have a banger of a fantasy day, about 5 points given those 3 sacks, but they held Detroit to just 20 points. That's the fewest points Detroit has scored all year. And now they get the Falcons, who have given up 4 more sacks in 4 of their 6 games. And this is a defensive line that can absolutely go and get after Ritter. They're 7th in giveaways, the Falcons are, with 10 total. They're 6th in points allowed to defenses. And they're just 29th in scoring, the Falcons offense. This game is projected for under 40 points, with 2.5 home favorites going to the Bucs. So if they force Ritter to throw, all the better, more turnover potential. And they defend the run very, very well, which plays into the strengths. It neutralizes, rather, the strengths of this Falcons team and makes it even more ripe for fantasy production. And your last couple streamers here are actually going against each other. The Commanders, 31% rostered. They get the Giants, who have allowed the 2nd most sacks on the season. Commanders themselves have the 6th most sacks. You've seen it. It's an abysmal offense. 2nd fewest points in the league scored by the Giants. Behind the only team behind them is the New England Patriots, and it's pathetic. Just such a sickening team as my team right there. So Commanders in a great spot. Not a great secondary, but a great front 7 that will definitely be all over Daniel Jones all day. And on the other side of the ball, though, you could maybe start the New York Giants, 2% rostered. If all these other defenses are gone, give them a look. A top 12 team in my rankings this week, given that the Commanders are the 1st most sacks allowed. We just saw the Giants also hold Josh Allen to 14 points. They looked really strong on Sunday Night Football here. Home team against a worse offense now. Maybe that was the spark they needed to just really light this thing into gear. They have talent, the Giants, on the defensive side of the ball. We know Wink Martindale loves to pressure, throw a ton of blitzes, and I don't know that Sam Howell will handle these very well. He's among the worst in terms of sacks that are his fault. He's at the top of the league in there. Now, his line also is towards the top of the league in sacks that are not Sam Howell's fault. It's just sacks after sacks after sacks. He's on pace for 96 on the year, an NFL record by almost 20. So I think the Giants also make a great play, but I would rank these streamers. Browns just on talent alone, how good they are. Raiders on the matchup couldn't be better against Badgett, whatever the guy's name is. And then the Bucs, and then the Commanders and Giants, also great streaming options as well. All righty, Wolfpack. That wraps up all the talk I have for this. So let's get into what you guys have for me. Thanks again one more time. We got Bulldog saying he's the first to smash that button. Love to see it, Bulldog. First here. You were here about 2 hours before I even got here, given the technical difficulty. So thank you so much for being here, my man. I hope you're still here. Really, really appreciate it. Nicola Lewin lost Monty and Kyron. Ooh, tough week. You got Ken Walker, absolute stud. So would you play Rashawn for the Bears or use waiver wires? So it depends on who the other guys are out there for you, Nicola. I think Rashawn can definitely be a solid option. I worry about this team in general, moving the ball at all with the backup quarterbacks. But Rashawn, assuming he's in, will be likely the majority touchdown guy. But now I need to know who else is out there potentially for you. Because I like Rashawn. I don't love Roschon this week, though. Given that, one, he hasn't even cleared the concussion protocol, and two, this is an offense that's going to be led by Tyson Bagent. So I don't have high hopes for that. So I would like to know who else you could potentially get before I fully commit you to Roschon Johnson. Charlie, what's up, my man? 1 week pure rental here. Love the context. That really is helpful. Gibson, Mason, Reynolds, Evans, McLaughlin. And trying to trade for Roschon. I'd probably rather have Roschon over them, but again, I don't know that I'd give up a ton to get any of them. There's just so much up in the air here, Charlie. Like, is CMC playing? If not, it's Jordan Mason. Is Jahmyr Gibbs playing? If not, Reynolds. For now, out of all these options with the information we have, I think it's Zach Evans. And even then, as I said, using my number 10 pickup here, I'm not overly enthused by it. I would probably go after Mason, though. I do think they rest CMC for a day, and I think he leads the way, and I just would rather have a 49ers back than the Rams offense has been very kind to running backs too, but I'm going to go Jordan Mason, I guess. But there's just so much more to figure out here, Charlie. This might be one of those situations, unless you have an elite kicker, you cut your kicker, you cut your defense, you pick up a couple guys, and you see how it plays out. McLaughlin's also in a pretty good matchup this week, but Javonte, I think, is on his pace to take over this backfield, looked as good as he's looked in a while. Lucio, happy PR. Eli Mitchell, Roschon, Josh Palmer, Scary Terry for flex. I'm going to go Scary Terry there coming off an 11-target day. Goff or Howell to pick up? Oh, definitely Goff. I mean, what's he, the quarterback 4 in fantasy right now, Matt B? Howell definitely has the better matchups, but Goff has been so much better and definitely better long-term too. So, yeah, I go Goff there. D. Jones, Dobbs, Mayfield, Carr, Pickett, or Ritter for Giuseppe Russo. Oof, it's pretty ugly, but I think I'd go Derek Carr here with that 350-yard passing day. That's what I would go for. I just traded away B-Rob, Nico, and Jamal for CD and Zay. That's a tricky one. Jamal and Zay, let's toss them out. I don't care about either of them. Neither of them move the needle much for me. So CD for B-Rob and Nico. In a vacuum, I always prefer getting the better player, and the best player here is CD Lamb. I think he's going to have a second-half tear. Being said, I love Nico. I think Brian Robinson did make a great sell high. This is very close for me. I guess if you were weak at receiver, but you had the depth, and Brian Robinson especially was like a fringe flex for you at best, I think you won the deal. I guess it just depends on your depth there. We got Mingo, Keontae, Ingram for Darius Slayton. Yeah, I'd probably, if you need the receiver play, I'd drop Mingo most likely. Drop LT for Michael Myers for Bulldog. Ooh, that's a good one. Obviously, Logan Thomas, so disappointing this week, but has had a great season. I think, though, rest of season-wise, Myers is trending the right way. The better prospect, the better talent at this stage of their careers, I think I'd probably go for Meyer. Kickers on bye. Would you rather pick up Mayer? I mean, we're talking backup kickers here. It's kickers. I mean, come on. Who cares? I guess Hopkins versus Indianapolis, maybe. Should prioritize picking up the Browns defense and Dalton Schultz with my waiver claim or Craig Ryan. Yeah, I think Schultz. So Rich, I should have probably included him in the first look. He's 50-something% rostered. You need a tight end. Schultz has got now 3 straight great weeks, really getting that target share up, the route shares up, and thriving. I know he's on bye this week, but I think definitely Schultz would be above any of these other guys. And I don't care much for Mason or Craig Reynolds. They're 1-week rentals at best. Thoughts on Keaton Mitchell? I have a deep running back room with Bijan, Kamara, Kyron, Warren. He did very deep room there, Lomi. I don't know that you have to hold on to Mitchell. Didn't play a single snap. Now, his first game back, I imagine he will continue to get his workload ramped up. Love the speed. Love the juice he's got. The team, they're not going to use him, though? What do you have use for him? When would he ever, with all these other guys on your team? He's never touching your lineup. Let's be real here. So I'd drop him for Reynolds. Yeah. Well, I guess these are all – is it Craig Reynolds, though? If it's Josh Reynolds, then absolutely. But you should probably be looking more for a wide receiver, Lomi, right? Have Breece Hall on bye. Would you play – yeah, I guess I'd play Rachaad White. I wouldn't like to, but on bye week blues, good source, 80% of snaps last week, despite Vaughn coming in here a little bit more. Sound look good. Oh yeah, his tunes telling me I was active. Great to know. I appreciate that. But it's no Chase Lobo. Hey, good to see everything looking fine. Thank you, Tomas Medina. I appreciate You let me know everything looks good. Who would I drop for defense this week? Algier or Chuba? God, it's got to be Algier if you have to drop one of them, KJ. Can you not drop your defensive last week, though? Why can't we keep them both? I think Chuba could definitely be taking this backfield over, though. He looked better than Miles Sanders has at any point this entire year. Whereas Algier will need an injury to Bijan to realize the ceiling. That ceiling would be humongous, though, if something happens to Bijan. So I really don't want to drop either of those guys. Eric, who would I get for now? So as we talked about, we gave you a few streamers. I think Sam Howell is the far and away best quarterback streamer out there. Derek Carr, 4 straight indoor dorm games, would be my next pickup, though. And if both those guys are gone, Gardner Minshew's probably out there for you. I don't love it, but 55 pass attempts. The volume's there. Hurts, Evans, Reynolds, please rank for waiver claims. Hunt, absolutely. He was my number 1 guy, as talked about. Evans, Reynolds, both kind of in that honorable mention. Definitely keep Jeff Wilson, though. Don't cut him. Gracias siempre. De nada siempre. Tomas. And Seahawks or Green Bay, I kind of like the Seahawks there, Tomas. Gracias. Thank you for being here. Appreciate the work you put in this, Wolf. You're my go. Hey, glad to hear that, Lomi. You're awesome. Thank you so much for consistently being there. I really do appreciate your kind words. You guys are why I do it, so thank you so much. My boy Wolfpack, best fan. Thank you, Mr. Trey Sarasenko. Consistently tossing us those super chats. You're the man. You've been so supportive this year. Flex 1, Rice, Gibbs, C. Watson, J. Ford, standard format. I'm going to do more sit starts on Thursday, grind don't stop, but of this list, I would probably say C. Watson, and then Jerome Ford would be my next up. Which kicker would you rather have rest of the season? I kind of like Aubrey, actually. Bass is just in too good of an offense at this point. I like Ahmed. I actually wrote about him last week, Patrick G. Mafia. I think when Jeff Wilson comes back, though, that's the last we see of Ahmed. I love the player. I love anyone getting volume in that offense. There's no doubt about it. But to me, Jeff Wilson's the clear-cut next one up. No, I got no interest in Elijah Moore. I'd rather have Wandale. I'd rather have anybody. I'm done with Elijah Moore. I don't know. Just nothing. Useless. So that we got that question earlier, Campanelli. I'd rather have Mayer, I think. Like them both. The floor is probably a little better with Logan Thomas since we've seen the role for multiple weeks, but Mayer is just trending that right way and a really interesting player. I'd rather have Achane than Madison 10 times over, especially if you're 4-2 and you're deep at running back. Oh, please go get Achane. Go. Absolutely. Patrick G. Mafia. Kicking myself, dropped Hunt. Oh, so I still love Wilson Jr. I'd probably even have Wilson Jr. above Kareem Hunt, Robert Moreno, especially if you don't need the immediate start. But Hunt is certainly a phenomenal play. You should ideally be able to have both those guys. I'd rather have Hunt over Akers at this point, Campanelli. We're just waiting for an injury with Akers, whereas Hunt could just continue to climb and take that role regardless. Would you drop Palmer for C. Samuel? Sullivan, that's a great question because I really like Palmer. I love that offense, and he's clearly Quentin Johnston's not coming near that lineup at all. I think I'd probably rather have Palmer the rest of the year. But man, do I like Samuel too. Hunter Hubbard rest of the season. I'd rather have Hubbard there, Campanelli. I think he's really going to potentially take this over. Drop Musgrave for Njoku and Dynasty. I don't know. Dynasty, both guys have decent enough long-term cases. I'd probably rather have Musgrave myself. Reynolds for Wandale. Another tough one, Giuseppe. Probably. Reynolds, I can only see going downhill here, but man, is he been reliable for you. So I don't know. I kind of like Reynolds. I think I actually keep him there. Steelers defense versus Rams or Colts defense versus Brown? I'd rather have the Steelers there. Native Ant. I think. Don't love either, though. I gave you a bunch of streamers. I'd have all those streamers above either of those two options. Would you pick up Chuba or Devin Singletary being both on a bye? I'd rather have Chuba than I'd rather have Singletary. And, Pierce, potentially cuttable for either of them at this point. I'd like to see what they do coming out of the bye, but it honestly looks like Singletary might be the back to own there. I get both on a bye. Robert, that's just kind of your team needs. Like, do you need somebody to start that you pick up this week or not? I don't care that they're on buys if I don't need to start them, It depends on if you need the space there. Saints, Jags, or Raiders. I like the Raiders there, that matchup against the Bears. Backups. Saints D or Brown? I'd play Browns or Bucks or Raiders over the Saints this week. Good to see you, Steve. How are you, brother? Buy low on Fields or is he toast? Oh, that's a great question. A lot packed into that. I'm a Fields believer. I think he's been hamstrung by horrendous coaching, pretty lackluster talent. You gave him DJ Moore this year, and we saw a couple glimpses of what that could be. I wouldn't be shocked if he's on another team at some point, and that's a great thing for him. Or if next year a great coach comes in, this coaching staff's going to be gone. So I do see buying low on Fields as an option. I do not think he's toast. I think those glimpses we got could ultimately represent a full season someday. So I think that's actually a smart play. You're thinking about it. Oh, yeah. I absolutely go Tank Dell over Pitts. And Pitts is intriguing. He's definitely trending the right way. Top 10 tight end probably rest of the season. But Tank Dell, I'm Tank Dell's biggest fan. So maybe that. He won't budge on that. Pacheco for Achane, that might be a little too much, Patrick. Because Pacheco is really starting to dominate the backfield of one of the best offenses in the league. If he's 1-5 and desperate, make him get a guy. You can get it for less than Pacheco, I think. Squeeze it out of him. At the end of the day, especially given you're 4-2 and you might not even need Pacheco, yeah, I probably would pull this trigger. I think Achane's going to win leagues down the stretch. You saw how damn good the guy was. Pacheco does not have that ceiling, but he's a nice player. So I would not want to do this. If this kid's desperate, I think it's too much. Out of Evans, C. Reynolds, Mitchell, or Mason? Again, Nicola, it's we don't know because we don't know if CMC's missing the game. That's Monday night, so that's a lot to wait for. I think probably if we knew CMC, once we get that update, it's going to be big because the 49ers are certainly much better players and much better offenses. So I'd rather go one of them, but we just have no update. But I'd probably pick up Mason for now. Maybe you can get Mason and Evans and stash them. But I don't know that any of these options were better than who we were talking about earlier that you were trying to. Yeah, so Patrick, we're in agreement on all this stuff. New to the channel, love to hear it. I hope you subbed. Would love to have you come back to more streams. These are awesome questions, great discussion points. We're live multiple times a week. Would love to have you join us for multiple, Patrick. This was really fun to have you. Gonzo, what's up, brother? This was, I remember you texted you. I think I texted you back in school. I hope I did. I remember seeing it and be like, oh, this is an interesting one. Love to see you, Gonzo. I mean, in a vacuum, I do rather have St. Brown the rest of the year, coming off a 30-point day. But I remember your team composition. You had great receivers. I think you had Nico on the bench. You had a good squad that needed a running back. And Bijan's tricky because at the end of the day, 50-50 split right now with Algier. What's going on with that carry share? But the receiving work is all there. At some point, I do imagine Ritter's going to turn the keys over to Heineke, and this offense gets even better. And at a certain point, there's the chance they just give everything to Bijan. They should. He's such an elite talent. So, again, I'd rather have St. Brown head-to-head. But I remember your team that you sent me, and I think for your team it makes sense. But hey, Gonzo, you know your gut. If you're sitting there and you're not feeling great about it, don't do it. You don't want to do something that's not making you excited, getting you a little horny down there. You got to be excited about the moves you're making, not trigger shy, not second guessing. And I understand why you're second guessing. I do. I do think the deal made sense for you, but just because it makes sense doesn't mean you have to do it. You know your gut. So trust your gut here. It's a great deal for your team, but it's also St. Brown's incredible. You're not going to be upset that you still have St. Brown on your team. I promise you that. So let me know what you decide. It's a tricky one to turn down or accept. I get it. I know why you're in a pretzel here. Well, Pat, thank you so much. On your way out, if you haven't hit that thumbs up, if you haven't subbed to the channel, we'd love to have you along for the long haul. Next time live will be Thursday Night Football Kickoff, giving you our preview show, higher, lower, Hail Marys, answering all your questions ahead of Thursday Night Football. Would love to have you join us for that. Until then, all my rankings, all our other content at rotostreetjournal.com. We breed and feed you fantasy wolves. Thank you, guys.